systems today. We've got a Carat 1,700 gallon underground water tank. We're going to do a couple of things. We're going to do an assembly video on it, and we're also going to install a bulkhead fitting. Now this is the bottom half of this 1,700 gallon tank. Obviously there's a top half. We've got the bottom half here upside down. I've got this area here where we're going to install the bulkhead fitting. I've got a rough center already marked. We're going to cut a hole in that. Now we're installing a 4-inch bulkhead fitting in the tank today, which is going to require a 6-inch hole saw. Now, normally you wouldn't install a 4-inch bulkhead fitting in this. This is for a special project where this tank is being used for a backup fire suppression system. So they want to connect all tanks, all 6 of them, with a 4-inch bulkhead fitting. Normally, under a normal rainwater collection system, we'd probably install a 2-inch bulkhead fitting. And I'll get those and show them to you. This is the 4-inch bulkhead fitting we're going to install here. Like I said, typically, more often than not, you're going to be installing a 2-inch bulkhead fitting in this location for a bottom drain, a balance line, so that all the tanks will fill and empty at the same rate. A 2-inch or even a 3-inch is more than sufficient. The 4-inch was going in. The biggest problem with the 4-inch is that you have to use such a large hole saw with it. So we're going to take the 6-inch hole saw and cut a hole in it using a cordless drill. It's something you want to be sure you're prepared for. It's a big hole saw, and it puts a lot of torque on it, so you need to be holding on to it really well. I probably won't go all the way through with it. In fact, what I found is a hole saw this big on this tank, this is pretty hard plastic, I'll cut most of the hole all the way through. You could get a larger drill, you could go with a 1/2-inch corded drill, but it gets to be a pretty big deal for the typical, especially if you're out on a job site. We're obviously here in a warehouse, so it's a little easier, but if you're out on site, then you'll use what you've got. But I'm going to go ahead and cut that hole or get it started here so we can get this fitting installed. Really gets a little bit easier to just go ahead and finish it off with something like a jigsaw, because as it begins to cut through the tank, the saw begins to bite really hard. It begins to be kind of difficult. You could probably go on through it, but since I've got a jigsaw here, I'm going to go ahead and use that. Now what we're going to do, of course, is take the tank half, flip it over, and install our bulkhead fitting. Remember, a bulkhead fitting, no matter what size, has a reverse thread nut that we're going to put on the outside, and we're going to take the fitting itself and insert it from the inside with our, in this case, the 4-inch has a really thick neoprene gasket, so it's going to be inserted from the inside out, and then we're going to put the nut on and tighten it up. We're ready to insert the bulkhead, as I said, from the inside out, with the gasket on the inside. So all we have is what you see here protruding through. On the big 4-inch, it has a flat surface. This goes against the tank. You've got these holes here. Those go on the outside. Then we'll tighten it down. These holes are pretty convenient for that. Want it good and snug. And there you have it. We've got the bulkhead fitting installed. As I said, it's the same for a 2-inch, 3-inch, or a 4. This area of the tank is what you use. Center it up, put it in like that, and you're good. Once your bulkhead fitting's installed, you're ready to use it for whatever. It would be PVC, whether it's Schedule 40 or Schedule 80. Threaded adapter is the best way to go. The inside threads are typical pipe thread. We recommend using an adapter like this, and that you can glue, in this case, 4-inch PVC directly into here. Elbow it on out. It's typical that you might go over to the next tank. The tanks would be arranged like this, side by side, so that you create a manifold that comes out of here goes over to the next tank, tees in or elbows in, depending on how many tanks you have. Like I said, this particular application is going to be 6 of these tanks with a 4-inch pipe connecting all 4, and it's strictly for an emergency fire suppression backup system. So that's what we've done here, and that's what you usually want to do. Is we can supply these with it if you order the tanks and the fittings and you need these. We do have these available, so just check us out at rainharvest.com. Now we're going to talk about tank assembly, putting the 2 halves together. And what you're going to do is you start with your what we call the tank seal kit, which comes with every tank. You want to make sure it's for the tank that you have. This is a 1,700 gallon or 6,500 liter, which it'll tell you right here on the seal kit that it is for the 6,500 liter tank. Inside, the first item we want to talk about in the tank seal kit is the gasket. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave this like this. We're going to get some lube on it. Now, in the kit, it comes with a tube of what amounts to a soap, and it is used for gasket lube. But the reality is that's really not enough soap to lube this gasket. It's a fairly large gasket, and it's just not enough. So we're going to lube it a different way here in just a second, and I'll show you how we'll do that. The other thing we have is a bag of these pins, and in the case of the 1700, there's 3 bags of the clips that we'll use to clip the tank together, and then also there's 4 lifting lugs, and we'll put all these on and show you how they go. The first thing I'm going to do is install these pins, and they go all the way around the tank. We just drop these in place. The next thing we're going to do is install the gasket, and it goes in this slot right here. But in order to do so, it's going to need to be lubed up, and it really needs a lot. So what I'm going to do is take this bucket, get you a bottle, a big one, of just any cheap dishwashing soap. We'll drop the gasket in here and liberally apply some soap. I'm going to get as much of it soaped up as I can here in the bucket, just so I can catch whatever residual soap drops down there and I can reuse it. Lube up as much of it as you can get. At some point, we'll just throw it back over here in the tank. We should have enough soap on it to be able to spread it over the entire gasket. We're going to add some more, but I want to get a good coat to start with. Press the gasket into the slot. At the same time you're putting it in, just keep spreading that dishwashing soap all, especially across this top edge that the top half of the tank is going to made up with. And as you can see, we have it pressed down into this gap. Take your fingers, work it in all the way around. What this will do, will get the gasket seated in the bottom so that the top half of the gasket will mate up with the top half of the tank when we set it on there, and help prevent the gasket from possibly folding over when we put the top half on there. I don't know if you can see, I've got a pretty good bit of soap on the gasket. Yeah, we just want to make sure that we get the gasket seated in the lower half all the way. I'm just taking my fingers and pushing it down, and what this will do is help get it in place where it needs to be when we set the top half on here. Now, I'll add some more soap to it because it's really not enough. Now, I talked a little bit about the soap that it comes with. You can use this as well. It's comes out more like a paste. You can go around after you get the gasket in place. And I'm just using my thumb and my first finger, just squirting a bead right on that top edge of the gasket. It's one of those situations where you want to make sure you got plenty of soap on it. There's really not a situation where you got too much. Because if you don't have enough on it, it gets difficult to put the two halves together. We'll take one last look at it here, make sure we got it all the way down and got plenty of lube on it. And it looks like we're in pretty good shape, so we're gonna go get the top half and put it on there. We're gonna set the top half on the tank with our forklift. That's a convenient way to do it here. If you're out in the field, hopefully maybe you have a Mini X that you can lift the top on. It can be done by hand. I would say with at least 4 sets of hands to set it in place is the best way. That way you can make sure all 4 corners are lined up and drop down. The pins will line everything up for the most part, but as you set the top half on there, you're gonna wanna make sure that the gasket doesn't get folded over. It should slide into the groove as they come together. You can feel when the pins line up and they fall into place. You see there's still a pretty good sized gap here. I found that one thing that seems to work pretty well is a pair of these vice clamps to help bring it together. If you don't have something like this, some type of clamp or something to that effect where you can see where we can pull it down, and you can see in this area it's getting pretty close together. What we're wanting to do is start with our clips, and what we're going to do is we're going to start a clip, in this case going in this direction, and we want to use a rubber mallet or a harder mallet like that. Either one is fine. And when you start the clip, you can see it's got a good start on it. One of the things you're going to want to have with you is a small block of wood so that we can go and tap them on down once we get a good start on it. We're gonna go in this direction all the way around, just that direction clip. So you skip one, go to this one, and so on. By having something like this to kind of clamp it down, really helps. While there's plenty of soap on that gasket, it's a very tight seal. So the 2 halves of the tank have to be clamped down a pretty good bit to get it where you want. Now what we'll do, what you have for the clips, there's about 60 of them, or there is. Your kit actually comes with a couple extras in case you lose some, which I'm sure never happens. So they only give you 2 just in case. But what you'll find is, as the clip goes on, if you don't have the tank together enough, then the clip, it's difficult for the clip to go to catch a grip there. So as I said, you can just, using something like this clamp, especially the first 10 or 15 clips as you go around, getting the 2 halves to come together takes just a little extra force there. So like I said, what we'll do is take our block, let's seat it down, and that, as you get more clips on there, it begins to pull the tank halves together. Might jump ahead a little bit here on this one, see if we can. If you don't have a set of vice clamps like this, I've also used a clamp like this. Works pretty well. One of the things that you want to do, especially if you see a larger gap in the tank, is maybe check to see if the gasket, if you look up in there, you should see where the gasket is straight and hasn't been folded over or pinched in any way. So as you go around, especially if you see a larger gap, as it comes together, you can see where the gasket will fit up into that groove. If you have to, you could take a small screwdriver. If you see a spot, and straighten it out, but that's not very typical. Usually it will it'll line up and pull itself together. Okay, now we go back around the other direction. We've got all the clips on, made sure they're all seated, except for that one, which we will check, but we want to go around and make sure all the clips are in, you know, all the way in their respective directions. The tank is ready to bury at this point. We're going to add these lifting lugs that it comes with. They basically just have some pop-out clips. I don't know if you can see those. And we're just going to jump up here and put these on. So it's ready to go in the hole. We've added the lifting lugs up there. You'll want to use a separate line for all 4 points and lift it that way. Don't just use 2 of them. Use all 4 when you lift it. The tank is about 400 or 500 pounds now assembled, about 450. This particular one does not have the dome and riser or access to the tank. This is an extension tank. So there will be no access to it once it's assembled. It will just act as a slave tank to the others. You will usually have at least 1 or 2 other tanks in the system that do have the access and the riser. So it's all set, it's ready to go in the ground. We're going to lift it up, put it on a trailer, and it's going out to the job. Thanks for watching.